Some dreams are not meant to be realized, and some are, of course, but if you think back to your childhood and some of the wishes and fantasies and goals that you had, and ask yourself with genuine sincerity if you are happy or relieved that some of those did not turn out, or that you perhaps did realize a dream. I'd love to hear from you. Because when I was younger, I remember being on a playground in a backyard. I don't remember whose house it was at. I was by myself, and I was on top of this slide, and I was pondering many great things. It must have been, 7 or 8. And as I was sitting at the top of the slide, emboldened, I thought to myself, I wish I was an adult right now. And I even thought about chores and vacuuming and paying bills, because my caretakers, my parents would talk about these things. And their experience, although it definitely had some burdens, was something that, for whatever reason, was enticing for me. And so, as a young girl, I wished that I could be an adult. Symbolizing, I think, some sort of freedom and independence. I could live my own life. I could create my own reality. And when I would talk to my parents about this dream only once or twice, they told me there's no rush. You don't want to have to pay bills. Trust us. But I didn't really understand what they meant. I didn't understand because I didn't have any insight into what it really meant to be an adult. And instead it was this illusion of my mind that from that position of consciousness, from the position of youthful consciousness, it did not understand the burden associated with adulting. So much so that when I was in my early 20s and I was trying to adult, I thought, who thought of this? This is terrible. This is a horrible experience. Now, by the way, I actually don't mind it. I navigate adulthood quite well, in my opinion. Not perfectly, but it doesn't hold the same stressors that it used to, even though it can be stressful sometimes. But I digress. So when I arrived to adulthood, although there was the excitement of being able to stay out all night if I wanted to, and to see friends anywhere, and to jump in a car and just drive to a different city, which I really loved, it came with burdens and responsibilities that, from my youthful position of consciousness, I found to be quite taxing and overwhelming. And this is interesting because I had other dreams, as I'm sure you did too, from childhood that would not become realized. Some of them I did hold on to. But looking back, obviously adulthood is one that was inevitable because it's a process of maturation. But some of the other ones were impossible and were not actually a good fit for me. And I think about the early points of my awakening, my spiritual awakening, where it seemed like my manifestation abilities were turned off. And from that position of consciousness, I was really frustrated because it was supposed to work. There's so many people out there teaching manifestation principles. And I even went to an entire conference about the manifestation process. And I was confused because it didn't seem to work the way that others who had come before me were teaching. And I wanted things like I wanted adulthood when I was a child, because my position of consciousness, which was just awakening, was still childlike. It didn't understand the bigger picture. And I'm not sure if other people have this experience when they are undergoing a spiritual awakening, but for me, I was in this abject naivety for quite some time, where I thought it was love and light and rainbows and unicorns and a cherry on top, please. And we're all going to kumbaya around the fire. And then I realized that there was this whole other part of it called shadow work. Who needs that, right? And there's also an initiation process and a trial by fire. I didn't know that. So my expectation from that position of consciousness, viewing everything from this lens of this naive perspective, it's unsalted, uninitiated, not mature. I experienced negative feelings because the things that I wanted were not coming into fruition. So I started devising different manifestation processes, trying to fix a system that I perceived that was broken. I, by the way, tried to do that first before I tried to do any shadow work, which is hilarious to me now. Really quite funny. And what I can tell you is that now, being years away from that position of consciousness and having matured into the next level with more to come, I now understand that then I didn't understand anything. And it makes me wonder, how much left is there for me to understand? And all I can do is get a sense that it's a moderate amount. It's not insignificant, which is incredible because of all of the hours that I've dedicated to this process, to still feel that there is a moderate amount left in the journey to still synthesize and understand and integrate into my point of awareness, which is different from the point or from the position of consciousness, although they are interrelated, is frightening because I had the option of launching myself as a teacher when I was new. And for a moment I tried. And I had a couple of people approach me to be their spiritual teacher. A longtime friend and a close person in my life. Very, very close. And I told actually 3 people and somebody that was more adjacent. And they were all coming in around the same month. And I said no to all of them because something inside told me that I wasn't ready. And I wasn't. I'd barely done any shadow work. I didn't even know shadow work was a thing. So I look around at some of the teachers and I wonder, what position of consciousness are they at? Have they done shadow work? And what I have found is that some have not. They have not. But you wouldn't know it by the packaging and by the public persona. And the shadows like to stay hidden. So this is not unexpected. For example, and I've used this example before, I'm not going to go into details, but I met somebody on the journey who was a yoga teacher and was interested in having retreats, had already done retreats, and identified as a spiritual teacher for some people. And I got to know them personally, and I was quite frightened that they were spiritually guiding anybody, to be honest with you. And I walked away from our friendship because of severe ethical issues and disagreements in the way that they were conducting all of their affairs, business and personal. And I found it to be quite frightening to imagine that they would have influence and desire influence over people without being ethically oriented at all. But I suppose that everybody serves a purpose in the spiritual awakening journey. And even people like that serve as lessons for other people who are attracted to them. And it's the same thing with narcissists. And usually I'm not fond of using that terminology because from a different position of consciousness, everybody's valuable. And in fact, I believe that the narcissist journey is a very powerful one for getting people to awaken to self-love and boundaries and self-respect. So I respect their purpose in our collective, but sometimes the methods that they employ are quite unpalatable for my personal liking. And similarly, I feel that although they do serve an important role in helping people to awaken, their flavor seems to be more along the pain side of things and the suffering side of things, and that they inflict suffering on people, and sometimes quite willingly. And from a different position of consciousness, I can actually see value in that, because I too have slipped in between different levels of seeing suffering as almost an illusion that is derived from the psychological machinery of somebody's mind and how they are perceiving and processing the world around them. And for example, if they internally shifted a particular narrative, this is my personal work, when I view things that appear to be hurtful to me, I ask myself, am I viewing this from my old wounded lens? Or am I viewing this from an objective lens? Or am I viewing this from a higher consciousness lens? And when I'm in my wounded lens, I experience suffering. But often the suffering is actually just derived from my own mind, from my own past history, my baggage, that I'm mapping onto the present moment, a meaning and a symbolic weight to it. They did this, and this means that, because that happened to me then. And when it happened to me then, I experienced a lot of pain that is still unresolved. So there's this whole loop inside that gets compressed into this is that. And it doesn't feel good. But sometimes this and that are not at all related. Sometimes it's just somebody showing up as their authentic self. And when you perceive it objectively, and you realize there is no slight behind it, there is no intent behind it, even if there was intent behind it, it clearly is pushing on a trigger that I still have, which is reminiscent of some echo of a pain deep inside that's reminding me of a lower position of consciousness that it's shifting me into. It's actually shifting my perspective into this lower position of consciousness. And I can try to control them, or I can do the inner work, the shadow work, and understand that actually, if I didn't have this wound, I wouldn't have this emotional response. I might have a different emotional response altogether. And this is the amazing part of the healing journey. When you actually start to heal, people and situations no longer affect you in the same way. It no longer brings up this reservoir of emotional turmoil that it did before. And so you can experience the world, you can experience reality very, very differently, in that narcissists don't exist. Isn't it wild? And then all of a sudden we shift into this different arena where somebody's behavior doesn't control your emotional responses anymore. And you can just let them be. And if you don't like the way that they're being, you can actually just separate yourself from interacting with them and dial into a frequency that actually you enjoy. And if you don't enjoy, meaning if there are major issues, compatibility issues, then you can just walk away. There is no power over you. You see what I mean? And this is a different position of consciousness because you're no longer sucked into this vortex of the past. And so this idea of positions of consciousness is really about maturation and who you are and how you think and what you want along your journey changes. How you feel changes. What you want to manifest changes. By the way, when I was early on in my spiritual awakening journey and I was perceiving that everything was blocked, I'm so grateful for that because at that time I was really, really tied to some manifestation plans that in today's position of consciousness are outlandish to me. Absolutely incompatible. The life I was trying to build and manifest, the career, the purpose, the everything that I was creating for myself, how I was going to brand myself in the world is so totally not me in today's moment. Imagine for a moment that everything that I wanted then came true. I would probably feel stuck right now. Feel like I had created this golden gilded cage, a gold prison for myself. And I wonder if I had become a teacher then, what kind of teacher I would have been. And if that too would have been a prison, not only for myself, but my students, because I hadn't done the level of work that I've done now. What kind of impact would I have had? Would I have been more challenging lesson? Or would I have just not been as fruitful as I could be now in helping people transform and grow? It's fascinating when you think about your positions of consciousness. What you want today might be very, very different than what you want in 2 years, depending on your growth curve and your rate of expansion of your consciousness and your abilities. And what you think is possible today might be completely obsolete and outdated in a couple of months, because you could have some wild shifts, especially with the Uranus transit that's happening for a lot of people in Taurus. And what's happening for everybody, but if you have significant placements in Taurus, then it's going to affect you in very, very interesting ways. So expect the unexpected. and allow your position of consciousness to change and grow without attachment to it.